to the Mvskoke Language and Culture class. Our special speaker tonight will be Edwin Marshall, but right now we're going to eat, and I just want to make a few announcements. First, did everybody sign in tonight? Because we're going to have a door prize that we're going to give away. Okay? Okay, raise your hand if you haven't signed in. Okay. Thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Are you ready, Edwin? Yeah. And tell you a little bit about Edwin. Edwin has done a lot for both the Creek and Seminole people. I heard him speaking at the Seminole Nation Days, and he really impressed me, the information that he provides there for not tribal members, just people visiting and interested in our culture. And I got to meet him out there briefly, and he's very involved in tribal governments over the past year with both the Creek and Seminoles. And Edwin doesn't want me to say this, but he's also running for one of our council positions in the Creek Nation and Chuckabuchee district. So remember our speaker when you're at the polls. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Edwin Marshall.
Thank you, David. You still go? Great. You know, as we were, David had everyone introducing themselves, I thought, hey, that's great, because our lesson tonight on the language lesson is going to include functional phrases, and part of those are introductions of ourselves. But before we do that, I had an idea last week, and I talked to David, Joe, Jeremy, and we thought it was a pretty good idea because this is a culture and language class. One of our people that's been attending faithfully is Scott Roberts, and Scott is not only has a great interest in our language and our culture, but he himself is a great, I guess you would say, provider of cultural knowledge. And Scott is an artist. Scott, as a younger man, got interested in his own cultural heritage, and to the point that he wanted to understand symbols, and he wanted to understand the craft of clay pottery, Mvskoke clay pottery. And Scott has done extensive research about Mvskoke pottery, and he's done a lot of great pieces over the years. He's probably the most accomplished Mvskoke pottery specialist or artist that I know, that I've heard of. Scott agreed to bring some of his pieces tonight to put them on display for you. I was, if you would, Scott, just have those out. You know, I don't know a lot about symbolism, the Mvskoke symbolism. I'm fascinated with it. I think it's cool. I think it's nice, you know, and I've read some about it. And it goes back prehistorically to our people back way before pre-Columbian times, and even ancient civilizations. Some of our designs come from ancient civilizations. Scott could tell you more about that, but some of our designs have also been linked to other cultural civilizations, such as the Mayans. But the Mvskoke pottery that Scott does these days is he uses the symbols, and I know we were talking just a little bit a while ago about the idea of reinventing or trying to come up with new concepts. When I teach the language, I don't like to incorporate words that I think sound fitting that aren't in the mainstream Mvskoke, for the simple reason I don't feel worthy to change our language. I don't feel worthy to change the language of our ancestors. I would believe that if there ever comes a time when we have a consistent, uniform understanding among all of our tribes that speak Mvskoke, which include the Creek and Seminoles, of certain translations, and we're all agreeable, I would probably agree with that. But I myself individually do not like to try to invent words or use people's words that have been invented unless it's universally accepted. We were talking about that a while ago. Scott is kind of the same notion with his art. Scott just doesn't go creating new designs or new shapes and things, and all of his designs and his shapes come from what he knows about what he's learned about the Mvskoke culture. So I really appreciate him for that. A lot of artists, true artists, they do that. They don't create or invent. They use what our people already knew, and I really appreciate that. I had also asked Danny Bieber to come tonight, and he did talk to me today, and he's involved in a powwow up in Seneca, Missouri. Couldn't make it down in time he wanted to, but his art also uses Mvskokean design, true Mvskokean design, and I really like that, but maybe he'll come at another date. But today Scott is here, and Scott, if you would, I'm going to give you just a few minutes to talk about these pieces you have. Do you mind if
Yes.
we pass those around? And if you do, that's fine.
First of all, the clay I've dug, or I hand dig my own clay, and I hand dig, process it, do everything from the ground up, even to the primitive firing. These are not done in a kiln, and this is not a glaze. This is hand burnished with a stone and deer antler before they're fired. And this one represents the medicine bottle. This would be your medicine blossom, your sun circle, and your serpent, stylized serpent. And let me just pass them around to see, let people look at it. This represents the fire pot. And this is how they transported fire. They put a leather thong right through here so they can carry it. You put in ashes in the bottom of it and one good hot coal, and then bank that with ashes. And they said you could carry that for about 8 hours and still have a fire and put it out. And I've also been told when they at the bust, they put out the old fire and start the new, and everyone would get a coal and put in their fire pot, take it to their dwelling, and start their new fire.
You know, last year we went on a trip to Alabama, Horseshoe Bend National Military Park, which is the site of the Great Horseshoe Bend, what's called the Great Horseshoe Bend, or the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. From our perspective, it was a Horseshoe Bend massacre. It was where, I think, well over 1,000 soldiers, troops, Loyal Creeks, Cherokees, all essentially caved in on the traditional creeks that were encamped at Horseshoe Bend and had a fortress set up there. And I said 1,000. No, it was way over. It was like 3,500. It was a great number.
Very outnumbered.
And basically 1,000 creeks who were cornered behind the little barricade, and it was just nothing but pure massacre. And just a few people survived that. Scott went down there with us on that trip. There was over 300 Creek people, delegation, including the chief, the second chief, and the chief and many of the council members. And we went down there just to observe this site. Nothing more than to just join in the commemoration of the bicentennial of that battle. And Scott, I noticed, Scott, all of the people there were taking in all of the sites and the various specific sites where the battle occurred and where the encampment was and what might have happened. And everybody was looking around in awe at the river that surrounded this thing and how this battle might have taken place, and people coming in across the river and coming in from the front toward the barricade. And I looked around, and Scott, there was all these Creek people, we were together. I turned around and looked, and Scott, he was down at the riverbank. He was looking at the clays and the soils, and that just goes to show you the way that Scott thinks as a pottery artist, what they had access to, the materials that our people had access to, and how they might have used that. And so I thought it was pretty interesting. You know, everyone has their own interest. Scott, tell us a little bit also what you found down there by that river after these many 200 years or so.
Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to talk about it. It was a real religious experience for me. And I'm one of the worst skeptics in the world. But the things that happened to me there were just unbelievable. When I was walking around out there in the village site, I looked down and it looked like a burl knot, and I've been interested in carving and everything all my life. And I picked it up and was looking at it, and I could tell that it was half of a war club. And I looked up, and the head ranger there was looking right at me, and I just threw it aside like it was nothing, because you're not supposed to take anything out. But I went ahead, like Edwin said, knelt down out there. I was looking at the sand, and it was just full of mica, just sparkles of mica. And I could just see my people in it. And it really struck me hard at what really happened there. And then Liz Yahola was standing over there, and she came over to me and she said, "Scott, look up there at the trees. That's when you guys was doing the stomp dance." And the trees were waving right with the tops of the trees was waving right along with you guys. And she noticed it first, and then I saw it. Then the next day, it was that night, we had the luminary where they lit up the whole battlefield out there with the luminaries. And I was sitting there looking at that, and that just really struck me too again. And then I looked up, and just as I looked up, there was a shooting star. Looked like it went right to the village. And then there was just a puff of wind that just came around me. And then I just had to go to the bus. It was just more than I could take. Then the next day, instead of going up there and watching all this mock battle and all this stuff that just really irritated me, I had one of those rangers haul me back down to the village. And I was going to see if I could find that piece of that war club. And if it was a war club, it had to have been black locust or something like that that wouldn't have decayed, or it had to have been buried and washed out, because I know most of the wood stuff was gone. But I went down there to find it, see if I could really tell if it was or not. And when I did, this little old Carolina wren just followed me everywhere I went, and just singing its head off, and I never was able to find it. But it was right with me everywhere I went. And I went all over that looking for that and couldn't find it. And I was the only one there. And it was such a peace to me too. Like I've told people, I wanted to just stay there that night and lay down there and just go to sleep. But I walked across the road down the river, and I'm turtle clam, and the river was up, and I looked, and this big old snapping turtle crawled out on the bank. Here are them tables from her. And it was just like he was saying, everything's okay.
I know there was a lot of emotional experiences by a lot of people that went along there.
Little old bird stayed with me until they came back down and picked me up. And I never did see the bird. But it's something I'll never forget. You can feel the people there. Or I could. I don't know if anybody else had an experience like that or not.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
After our class today, if you want to, Scott's going to leave this stuff out here. If you want to take a closer look at it, I think it's very fascinating because it's fashioned exactly the way the, our pre-Columbian historical artifacts are made. I was looking at that bowl that you said that carried the fire, and I could only imagine that our people, sometimes they moved their fires, and of course the ultimate move was during removal, where they brought the fires from the southeast in Alabama and Georgia, and I can imagine that they carried in, these kind of things that would keep the fires going. So I think that's, I appreciate you for bringing those, Scott. And like I
Even
said,
on hunting parties, they would carry a fire pot and have somebody that managed the fire.
yeah.
That was their job when they'd go on hunting parties or whatever they did. And,
All right. Well, we're going to move on. I gave everybody a handout today, and of course the top cover is always the alphabet. I've given one at every lesson we've been to, and I've handed out 3 copies. And I'm sure that some of you faithfully brought your original copies back. You have the alphabet sheet? Everybody got the alphabet sheet? No? Check and make sure you've only got two papers in front of you. He needs an alphabet. Oh, you got the alphabet, you just need the lesson. Okay, is somebody carrying the last lesson with them today? You got the last lesson with them? What was the last lesson? Was that on the days, weeks, and months? The first one was the foods, right? The last one was days, weeks, and months. And so what's this month called? Somebody? Marcia? Mvskoke? Little chestnut. I think about that word sometimes, and I think that, that's one of those words that we know that traditionally it's an old word, because when we had those kind of trees back in the southeast, chestnut trees, but we don't have them here in Oklahoma, so a lot of our young people don't know what a chestnut is, because we don't have exposure to them like we did in the southeast. I'm sure that we lost a lot of words and concepts by being moved to Oklahoma, but we picked up a few too. So I think it's fascinating. Speaking of going back to Alabama, when we were down there, we were there at a time when you would have seen wild onions here in Oklahoma. It was in March. And I kind of looked around down there. I didn't see any, but a couple of people said they thought they saw some wild onions down there. I didn't see any. But they were all ripe here, or they were green here in Oklahoma when we left. So I imagine there's some differences, a few geological, not only geological, but in differences in plants and things like that. So this word Mvskoke is a good example of that. It's the name of a month that we named after a tree. When the fruit of that tree, the chestnuts, would become ripe or start getting to be ripe in September, it was called Mvskoke. And then in October is Mvskoke, means big chestnut, which means ripened. But we don't, it's just a concept to us because we don't see chestnuts around here. Anyway, that was last month's lesson. We talked about days, weeks, and months of the year. This week, I thought that we would kind of step it up a notch a little bit. We're going to talk about functional phrases, but before we do that, we're going to do something that we do every week or every lesson, and we're going to go over the alphabet because to me that's the key to learning the words and to learn spellings and everything. And so what I want to encourage you to do, yes sir?
Do we have the same months in our calendar year as Gregorian calendar, or do we go by Jewish calendar?
No, we go by, I guess you would say, Gregorian calendar. We have 12 months in a year. Yeah, 12 months in a year. And actually, we call our months, this is interesting. Somebody said, why do we say Huzzy? Huzzy refers to the sun. When the moon is actually affects the calendar months, I mean, the moon phases every 30 days or 28 days or so like that. But we call our months Huzzy, which refers to the sun. So I don't know where that connection is. Someone asked me that. I said, I'll be honest, I don't know. They said, look, like we ought to call it Hazisi, or like the harvest moon or the wind moon or something like that. But we call it the sun, Huzzy. But anyway, that's a good question there. But get your alphabet page out, and please, I'm going to go over this, and if we're going to learn this, if you as a student are going to learn this, you have to participate by joining in on the pronunciations. Please don't be bashful, because that's how you're going to learn. I know last week we were a little bit bashful, some of us. So blurt it out there when I say it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through them, and I'm going to say it first, and you repeat. And the second time we go through it, we're going to say it all together. So this first time, I'm going to go through them, listen to how I pronounce them just like me, and then we'll go back through it again. Are you all ready? Ah, chi, e, fi, he, a, ki, li, mi, ni, o, pi, si, ti, u, we, ye. Also, if you have a pencil in your pocket, and I don't have one, if you look at the letter U that makes the sound oo, please strike that N. That's just a misprint. Strike that little N right there. It shouldn't be there. I was proud of you that time. Everybody pronounced your letters. That's great. This time we're going to do it together. When I say 3, and when I say it, you say it with me. Okay? 1, 2, 3. Ah, chi, e, fi, he, a, ki, li, mi, ni, o, pi, fi, si, ti, u, we, ye. Great. Now, I know that some of you have been here, just like David said, every class. Some of you have been here to most of the classes. Some of you have been to some classes, and some of you, this is your first time. Either way, we appreciate all of you, but I did want to acknowledge somebody that's here with us tonight. She introduced herself. It's her first time here. Tell us your name again.
Elizabeth Deer.
Elizabeth Deer. I met her on Facebook, and we've been talking about She's fascinated with our language because it is her language too. But we got to talking, and I remembered her from. She lived in Wetumpka one time when she was little. She was a little girl, and I remember her family lived there before she was adopted. She was with her original family, and I knew her original family. And once again, what was your family's last name again? Holaby. And I know the Holaby family. And there's some around Dustin and Hannah and down that way. But she's gone a lot of places, and she's fascinating. She's been, I think she's been living around Cherokee some, and up around Tulsa, and now she's in Oklahoma City and making a way for her family. How many children do you have? 7 children. I thought that was just great and fascinating. But she has never. I remember when she was little, her family used to go to stomp dance all the time. I think her grandpa, they call him Nadoki. Is that right? Yeah, Nadoki. I used to see him around Gar Creek Stomp Ground a lot. But anyway, her family lived in Wetumpka. I do remember seeing her when she was a little girl, so I thought that was pretty fascinating. Welcome to the class. And for those of you that haven't been here the last time, welcome back. Sissy, good to have you back. And for those of you that have been here every time, great. Keep coming. Bring other Seminoles and Creeks with you, or anybody else that's fascinated in the language. You all did a good job on the alphabet. I think we're learning that. Next time I'm going to turn you loose on it. I'm going to let somebody else lead it, and we're going to take turns doing that. But I think it's important that every time we start this class with the alphabet, because if you're going to read and write the Mvskoke language, you have to understand that alphabet. It's very essential. As I said, and as I announced this week on our Facebook site, our lesson this week is we're going to just not have word translations. We're going to use functional phrases. And these are very elementary phrases, things that you would say ordinarily in a conversation. It's the Mvskoke tradition when you become acquainted with someone to tell them who you are. And something that I didn't include in this is that it seems to me like when I was growing up and I always watched the old people, they always asked each other, who's your folks? When they met one another and they saw each other, in other words, who are your parents? Who are your people? Because then they could relate to who you were. Whether it was your mother's side, your dad's side, but usually we talk about our mother's side first, because we're a matrilineal society. And then we would say, what tribal town are you? Or what clan are you? That was the most common. What clan are you? Because we have a identity system, relationships based on our clans. And then eventually, what tribal town are you? In other words, back a long time ago, when you said what tribal town are you, it was the same thing as your ceremonial ground. But now, a lot of people don't participate in ceremonial ground, or they may have a tribal town but participate in a different ceremonial ground. So that's how we learn about each other. We tell each other, where do you live? Or else we say, this is where I live. So what I did is I took some very common elementary phrases, and I brought those today, and as I always do, I wrote the Mvskoke spelling first, followed by the phonetic pronunciation. It's broken down by syllable. And then I put the translation at the last. So the first word is Istongo. Istongo. I think I talked about this in a previous lesson, but traditionally when you meet one another, that's the initial greeting, is Istongo, and it means is all well. Is all well? Istongo. And the pronunciation is right there, as you see in that second column. And I'm just going to randomly pick people to just say that tonight as we go around the room. Scott, please pronounce that word for me.
Which one? I'm hard of hearing.
Okay. The first one.
Ayo.
No, the next page.
Oh, the next page.
Do you have both pages?
Yeah.
Yeah. See the phonetic pronunciation? Istongo, yes. Yes. And that's the initial greeting, and it says, is all well. The next word, somebody pronounce that for me. Marcia? Estongezos. Do you all see that phonetic pronunciation right next to it? Estongezos. Which means it is good or it is well. Estongezos. And that's the response to the question. The question is, Estongo. And the response is, Estongezos. Let's all say it. Okay, so when someone comes up to you and says, Estongo, then you can respond, Estongezos. Or there is an optional response, and that's the one that's most common. How do we pronounce that R in that word? HG. HG. Let's all say it. HG. Remember how I told you all how to make that sound the last time? Take your tongue. Don't put it on your front teeth. If we say TH like that, we put our tongue on our teeth. Instead, put your tongue on the roof of your mouth and let the air out of the sides of your tongue while you're making that sound. Say it. HG. Takes a little practice. And that's an optional response. It also means, but it's a little more exclamatory. That's why it's got that point there. HG. It means it is good. So if someone says, is all well? And you say, it is good. Okay, here we go. This is the fill in the blank word. And the word itself is, let's look at the phonetic pronunciation. Let's go to Marcia. Say that word. Marcia Chahujipkados. Or you put your own name in there. Chahujipkados. See that? Yeah, Chahujipkados. Y'all see that phonetic breakdown right there? Kissy. You say it. Kissy Chahujipkados. Kissy is my name. All right. Next word. Joe. Say it again. Yep. Do you use your phonetic? Nugget. So say it, kind of make it sound like a question. There's a question mark on the end of it. Chihujipkari. Nugget Chihujipkari. And that means, what is your name? Good job. That's a long word too. Good job, Joe. I want to stop right here, and I want to, once again, I did this last week, but I want to remind you, please exercise these words. Don't just learn them in here and then take it home and lay it down, or pick it up and look at it every once in a while at home. Say it to yourself, even if you think you sound silly sitting there in the dark by yourself, or sitting in the living room by yourself. Practice these words. Nagichiwujipkadi. What is your name? Nagichiwujipkadi. And be sure on the phonetics, notice it says chi, nugget, chi, because it one little change, like cha, nugget, cha, wujipkadi, you're changing the whole meaning. You're saying, what is my name? So what you're asking is, what is your name? So, nugget, chi, wujipkadi, nugget, chi, wujipkadi, what is your name? Young lady, I'm sorry. Remind me your name. Camille. Look at your phonetics on that next word and say that phrase for me. It's a question, so make it sound a little more like a question and say it again. Mvskoke. Chinda ishtamet Mvskoke. You see those slash marks? That's for a separation in the word. In other words, that's two different words when you see a slash mark. The first word is, Camille? Chinda. Chinda. Say the next word only. Ishtamet. Chinda ishtamet. And last word? Mvskoke. Chinda ishtamet Mvskoke. And that says, and you, who are you? So, when you first introduce yourself, let's go back 2 words and say, Camille Joseph Kados. And once you introduce yourself, then you can say, Chinda ishtamet Mvskoke. And you, who are you? Mm-hmm. Good. So when we introduce ourselves, we get acquainted, we'll say, hi, my name is Joe, and you, who are you? That's the way of saying that. Okay. Let's move on. And I want to explain this one. It's a little bit complicated here. There's a blank there, and it says blank. And this is, dimbi is an optional word. Blank dimbi laigaidos. And the reason it's optional is because look on the very end, it says dimbi means near. So let's say you live in the country but you don't live in town. Let me give you a good example. I know where Jeremy lived in back home. He didn't live in Dustin, he didn't live in Wetumpka, but he lived nearer one of those 2 towns. So his answer would probably have been
either one. Depends where I'm at.
What would you have probably said?
Wetumpka.
Okay. Wetumpka dimbi laigaidos. In other words, I live near Wetumpka. But if you live in town, you don't need that word dimbi. Okay? Okay, so if you wanted to say, I live in Oklahoma City, Elizabeth, can I call you Liz now, by the way, since we've met?
Sure.
Okay. I told her, she told me one time on Facebook, I said, what do they call you? She goes, my family calls me, friends and family call me Liz, but other people call me Elizabeth. And I said, all right, then I'll call you Elizabeth. Then we meet. She said, okay, that's good. So now she's Liz. All right. All right. So Liz lives in Oklahoma City. So what would you say in this case, Liz?
I can't say it, babe.
Use the phonetics. You can say it. I promise you can say it.
Oklahoma City?
Yeah, Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City.
Laigaidos. See the phonetics?
Okay.
Laigaidos. Oklahoma City. That's good. Oklahoma City, Laigaidos. All right. But if you say you lived out in the country, then you would pick the nearest town that you live to, and you would say, I live near so-and-so, by saying, Holdenville, Denby, Laigaidos. That means I live near Holdenville. So people assume that you live maybe in the country. Okay? Any questions so far before we get too far ahead? Has anything kind of stumped you here, or is there any comment? Please feel free to make a comment anytime you want to as well.
MB, that means near.
Near. Dimbi. If you say Walmart, Dimbi Laigaidos. I live near Walmart. Yeah. Then you would say, take the Dimbi out and say Walmart Laigaidos. I live in Walmart. And so once we told people where we lived and we wanted to know where they live, let's go to the next sentence. And Sissy, did you do one yet? Did you do one yet? Okay. The next one. Istamanlegitski Oma. Istamanlegitski Oma. Let's all say it. Where do you live? Istamanlegitski Oma. Where do you live? Because you already announced where you lived. I live near Walmart. Where do you live? Okay, let's move on. This is where we start getting a little personal. And we tell people who we are. Do most of you in here, raise your hand if you know what your clan is. That's almost everybody. That word is a little bit complicated because it's got so many syllables. But I've got it broke down by phonetics. David?
Yes.
You know what clan you are and you know how to say that animal. So let's see you say that sentence. Okay, use your phonetics and say that second word slowly. You're not looking at your phonetics. No, you're raising your head before you finish looking at there. Amidilegidet. Ijo algit. Amidilegidet omis. You got it right. Ijo algit. Amidilegidet omis. Now, what animal or what object is your clan? Let's go around the room and let's say it in Mvskoke. Jeremy?
Mine's wildcat tiger. But I don't know it in Creek.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
Gotcha. Okay, remember that, okay?
Okay.
That's your personal lesson. But if you are wildcat or panther clan, gotcha ogit. Gotcha ogit. That means your clan. The gotcha is the animal, but clan is gotcha ogit.
Gotcha.
Of the tigers or panthers. Do you know, Scott?
Turtle.
Turtle. The word for turtle? Loja. 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 Lo. Loja. Yeah. Loja Ogi. Sissy? Wotko. And then your clan, you would be called Wotkogi. Yeah. Marcia? Mvskoke, bear clan. Okay. Kachogi. Okay. Panther, wildcat, tiger, whatever. Joe? Mvskoke. All right. You can almost tell by looking at Joe. Okay. Mvskoke. Also bear clan. Brother and sister. Yeah. All brothers and sisters. Yeah. You. Do you know, have you?
I think that it's alligator, so
Hobadogi. Hobada is alligator and Hobadogi is alligator clan. You know Lisbon? You don't know? Okay, just for the sake of this, we're going to call you Wind Clan just for tonight, okay? Okay, and Wind is Hodali, right? Hodali? And if you're Wind Clan, it's Hodogogi. It's one of the most prevalent clans there is. And we talked about the clan story, didn't we, originally? We haven't yet? Oh, that's a good one. Ijowogi, deer clan. All right. Bear, Mvskoke. Oh, we got a lot of brothers and sisters in here tonight. David? Ijowogi, brothers. All right. And I'm Korswogi. You know, in our, we won't go into this tonight, but in the clan system we have brothers and sisters, we have what we call mothers and fathers, and we call grandparents. We got grandpas. If our dad was another clan, in my case, he just happened to be Bird too. But if he was a different clan, let's say my dad was because we get it from our mom. My mom was a Bird. But if my dad was a Deer clan, if my personal dad, blood dad, was a Deer clan, then all Deer clan members would be what I call, Indians say, Chufki, means my dad. Y'all are all my dad, if that was the case. Or Greek people, some of them say Baba. I'm Baba. That means my dad. Or Chaboja, my grandpa. Might be my grandpa. If my grandpa had been Deer clan, then all Deer people would be my grandpas. That's how the system works, but just a little note there. I see right now our next lesson is going to have to be the story of the clans. All right, let's move on. So in my case, Bushwogi, that's Bushwa Ogi. I'm Bird. Bushwogi, Amidilagid Omis. Or Bird is my clan. Bird clan is my clan. Okay, the next one is a question. See the question mark on the end? Who did I jump over? Anybody? Did I jump over? Did I jump? I jumped over you, didn't I?
I guess.
Yeah. Let's use your phonetics and say that phrase right there. Chinda nagit chimidilagida oma. He said it. Hey, don't tell the phonetics. Phonetics let you say anything. If you was to see it spelled out, you'd be like, all right. But when you use phonetics, you can say anything. It's kind of like pickup sticks. Pickup sticks, you ever play that where you scatter them all over the table and you say, oh my God, what are we going to do with that? But if you take your time and pick up one at a time, you can beat the whole game. That's the way phonetics helps you with the language. If you say it one syllable at a time, you can say anything. Matter of fact, that's one of the longest words I know, Chimidi-Lagida. And he said it just fine. Chimda-Nagit, Chimidi-Lagida, Oma. Say it one more time. Chimidi-Lagida, Oma. And what is your clan? That's what that means. Next one. That one was talking about clans. Our political identities, that's a traditional identity. Our political identities are our tribal towns. Or in the case of the Seminoles, bands. They call them bands. The band system in the Seminole comes from the original tribal towns. You got to remember, Florida Seminoles and in Oklahoma Seminoles, the Oklahoma Seminoles were primarily Mvskoke Creeks who went to Florida on their own accord to get away from the European advancement, and they were grouped together with other native groups in Florida and called Seminoles. But the primary language of the northern Florida Seminole is Mvskoke. And so when they went down there, they had bands just like we did, like they did when they were the Mvskoke. But with these other groups of people joining in with them, their tribal towns somehow changed a little bit, and some of them started calling them bands because they weren't necessarily Mvskoke Creek people with it. There were I can't remember what's some of the other native groups down there. David, the dominant Mvskoke. Okay, so Mvskoke's joined in with them. I think maybe some Yamasi and a few other groups, and so they weren't pure Mvskoke. So they kind of changed their tribal town name, so some of them became bands. So for this purpose, when we say Idolwuji, Amidolwuji, we're talking about tribal towns in the case of Creeks and bands in the case of Seminoles. Who's enrolled Seminole here? Or who's part Seminole? What band are you? Ocheezy. How about you? Tom Palmer? Tom Palmer? See, there's a good example. Tom Palmer band, that wouldn't have been a tribal town back in the old days. But Tom Palmer was the leader of this one group of people, and so they called them a band. Ocheezy it was an original tribal town, but it became more predominant with the Seminoles than it did with the Creeks, even though it was originally a Creek tribal town. There's very few Creek Ocheezys, but there's a lot of Seminole Ocheezys. Elizabeth? Tom Palmer. Who's the next Seminole around here? Tom Palmer. Tom Palmer. That's a big band. Ocheezy. Okay. No Dozer Barkus or no Bruners? Okay. But when we say Idolwuji, we're talking about tribal towns in the case of Mvskoke Creeks or bands in the case of Seminoles. So keep that in mind as we say this word. And in honor of the Seminoles, I'm going to let Marcia say this word and use your band. Amidolwuji. Yeah. Ocheezy, Amidolwuji Rumis. Ocheezy is my tribal, or is my band. Okay? Joe, what is your tribal town? Huh? Tlaco, yeah. Tlaco is my tribal town. Okay. The next one. Chinda, Ishtamet, Chimidolwujidi. Look at the phonetics. Chinda, Ishtamet, Chimidolwujidi. And it means, and you, what is your tribal town or band? Every word, every phrase in there where it starts with Chinda, what's that mean?
Asking a question.
Asking the question, and you? Chinda. Sometimes y'all hear that just in conversation, don't you? Talking about other things. They'll, you know, the old people, they'll say, ooh, Chuck Police, I'm cold. Then they'll say, Chinda. Are you? Or, ooh, and how you? I'm hot. Chinda. Are you? Chinda Ishtamet Chimidolwujidi. And you, what is your tribal town or band? Next phrase. Here's another way that a lot of our people identify with one another is when they see each other somewhere, especially at say a religious function, gospel singing or church or just wherever, at a funeral or wherever. Let's see. Ma'am, in the corner with the OU shirt on. Where's your church membership at?
It's at Glorietta.
Glorietta? Okay. Use that blank and fill in with Glorietta and say the rest of that word.
Oh, yeah, right.
Phonetically, you can do it. Look at the phonetics. It's easy.
Glorietta, he goes up. Zep, Shogo, Bagat, Omas.
Baigat. Okay. I want everybody to say this word with me and look at your phonetics and follow my lead. Ready? Mvskoke chogo baigat omas. Glorietta Mvskoke chogo baigat omas. Glorietta Church. And Abegadomes literally means I belong in there, but what it means is I'm a member of Glorietta Church.
Could you decipher the Mvskoke?
Mvskoke?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mvskoke means to pray. Mvskoke means a house that you pray in.
House of prayer.
Yeah, house of prayer. Yeah. Mvskoke means a house that you pray in. Abega means I belong in there, like almost like that's your shelter, or you belong inside of there, you know, literally is what it means, but what it means is I'm a member. Let's go around the room, tell me what church you belong to. And David told us, where was it?
Well, I don't know if I'm a member yet, I haven't asked me.
Okay, but where were you a member?
Middle Creek number 2.
You're originally a member of Middle Creek number 2.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of thinking about joining another church.
Yeah.
All right.
Victory Church.
Victory?
Victory?
Victory.
Glorietta.
Glorietta?
New Heights.
New Heights?
It's in Owasso.
Oh, okay. That's right. I'm just, go ahead.
I'm a member of Gloria, but I attend First Morn.
You attend what?
First Morn.
Oh, okay.
First Indian. Morn.
I'm not, you know, I'm not a big scholar or anything like that, but I think the Bible says where it was close to you is the most convenient, is where you should be going, right? Yeah.
They're close.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I'm a Sundancer.
Sunday, all right, all right. Yeah.
I go to First Indian Baptist in the morning, and we have a few good seats available for those that are looking for it.
Always room. And same, yeah.
No back seats left.
First Indian Baptist in Morn.
Marcia,
Little Washita lecture.
Little Washita. Sissy,
Picklebutt in Owensville.
Dugabuchi,
First Nazarene in Bethany.
First Nazarene.
My home church is Middle Creek number 1, but I go to People's Church here
Oh.
in the city.
All right. Is there something about the word Bethany and Nazarene that kind of go together? Is that right?
Huh?
Is there something about the word Bethany and Nazarene that?
Yeah, used to be a college called Bethany Nazarene.
Oh yeah, I knew there was some connection there.
Southern Nazarene.
Yeah. So let's move on. We've only got one more to go. So if you identify your church and you say Mvskoke Abegadomes, in other words, you've said this church is where I'm a member. And finally, there's that word again, Chinda. You know, sometimes if you make your announcement that said you told where you went to church or where you're a member of, you said Middle Creek, Mvskoke Abegadomes. And the next word, if you said Chinda, that's self-explanatory. In other words, I told you where I go to church, how about you? But the whole sentence, let's all say it together. Ready? Chinda, Mvskoke Ishtaman, Atitski Noma. Chinda means, and you, Mvskoke means church. Ishtaman means where. Atitski means go, and Oma means do you. And you, where do you go to church? Chinda Mvskoke Ishtaman Oma. That doesn't necessarily ask you where you're a member, it just means where do you go to church. It's like, you know, some of us, we may be members, and because that's the way I am. I'm a member of one church, but I go to another church more frequently, and because it's more convenient, and that's what you're supposed to be doing. Sissy talked about being a member at Tugabuchi. Her father was a pastor there until he passed away, and so she grew up in that church, but her other family goes to Salt Creek Methodist, and she's probably as much at Salt Creek Methodist than she is at Tugabuchi. And so that's kind of how that with Indian people, it's kind of like our clan and our ceremonial ground. This may be my clan or this may be my ceremonial ground, but I'm around these people a lot too. It's the way with our churches. So That's tonight's lesson, folks. Once again, don't take this home and lay it down and forget about it. You're not going to learn it if you don't use it. Use it over and over. Practice with it. Practice with the ones you already have from last time. And always, always work with your Mvskoke Creek Seminole alphabet. You guys did real good tonight. We're going to close this out by going through the alphabet all together one time. Ready? A, G, E, V, E, A, E, Li, Mi, Ni, O, P, C, C, T, U, A, We, Yi. Thank you. That's great. I didn't say just, all I said was ah. Good job. You know what? We had a big crowd the first couple of meetings we had. It kind of died out last time. We're making a resurgence. I feel good about this. Bring friends with you. Let's keep this thing going. I enjoyed the food. And let's eat some more food, by the way, before we leave. There's a lot of food left over. David, I'll turn this time back over to you. Thank you.
How about a hand for Edwin Marshall? I want to tell you that's very helpful. My mother used to get very frustrated with me when she was trying to teach me. And there was times, I caught her one time pretending like she was asleep when she saw me walking in there with my Creek dictionary. I said, Mom, I'll see you now. But I would pronounce things back to her, and she would say, no, you're not saying it like me. And I could swear I was saying exactly like she told me. But she said, no, that's not right. And I noticed, I caught myself here, I would repeat phrases that I, for sure, thought I knew, but these phonetics showed me where I was wrong. So it was very helpful for me to see the phonetics. And this time I've been trying to teach myself to read and write Creek without the phonetics. So I really like the idea of these phonetics. And so tonight we're going to have a drawing. So has everybody signed in? Okay. Well, we're going to do it a little bit different. I've got these numbers, and I'm going to put them inside my hat. And we're going to...
Let me show it off.
Okay. This is a vest that was made... And I picked this up at the Creek Nation Festival, and the gentleman that made this, his name is Tom Barnett. And it's never been worn, it's brand new, and I thought it'd make a nice gift for the drawing.
Green corn time. Huh?
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to put these numbers in the hat, and we'll have Edwin draw a number.
Now, there's numbers in here that aren't assigned to anybody. I got 25 numbers in here, and there's only about 18 of us. So.
Toss them up around a little bit. Right there.
All right.
Good number. Cross your fingers.
We'll see if I can read it.
What's that look like, Edwin? Number 13.
Lucky 13.
Who's number 13? Let's see.
Mary Sissy Tiger.
Mary Tiger. All right. So I'm sure there's a gentleman in your family who'll appreciate that. All right, so at this time, if there's not any announcements, there's plenty of food left. We don't have a time we have to get out of here, so thanks for coming.
Any comments or?
Any comments or questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
When we was at Horseshoe Bend, we stole some of the sand from Horseshoe Bend, which I didn't feel like I was stealing it. I thought it was ours anyway. But I'm using that sand to temper some of my pottery. And it just got these sparkles all through it, that mica in the clay. and I'm not selling them. I'm giving them to special people I know. And I didn't get away with very much, and then I got back home and went to our meeting over at our meeting hall, and one of the girls said, well, you want a whole bunch of it? She went down there with a shovel and she dug her a sack full of them. So I've got quite a bit. But something like that I can't sell. I couldn't feel right about selling something like that.
Do you ever
So-
have classes? Do you ever do classes?
Do classes? Yes, I just finished one in Bristol. I do. I'm supposed to be set up at Cromwell in November. I haven't got a date yet.
Okay, I do have
Another announcement to make. How many of you live here in Oklahoma City area? Okay, this is something you might be interested in. You're familiar with the OCMA creeks on 4111 North Lincoln Boulevard. That's the Oklahoma City Mvskoke Association. And starting this week, they're doing a cultural enrichment class, and the topic is stump dance. And it's September 14th, starting tomorrow, and it'll be Monday and Thursdays through October 29th for the next 7 weeks. It'll be from 6 to 8 o'clock, and I'll have guest speakers there for you, for those of you interested. And that's on 4111 North Lincoln Boulevard, and that'll start tomorrow at 6 o'clock. It's the Mvskoke Creek Cultural Enrichment class, and it's the OCMA, Oklahoma City Mvskoke Association.
Who's teaching that?
It says guest speakers. That's all the information I have. So for those of you interested, I'm going to attend myself and see what I can learn.
And you might let everyone know about the video will be posted to the page.
Okay. And the video, for those of you who are watching this, and for those of you who want to follow up on the lesson tonight, and I always watch the lesson back, and I usually get more out of watching it the second time than I do when I participated the first time. And anyway, Jeremy will have that available, and he usually posts that on a couple of different Facebook pages. We have one for this class. A lot of you know about that already, and then there's another one called Mvskoke Word of the Day. And there's another way you can, Jeremy, you want to tell them about how they can do that? Go to Periscope and pull it up.
You know, the easiest way to do that would be to go to Twitter. For you guys that know the Twitter, go to my personal page, which is www.twitter.com, then the / and then Jeremy Fultz, which is JEREM as in Mary, Y, Fultz, F as in Franklin, UL, T as in Tom, Z as in zebra. So, and then also put a link on there in our Oklahoma City study group too. So like a live link there too.
Okay, I think that's great. And is there any way you can tell how many people tuned in tonight?
Not yet, not till I disconnect.
And I was amazed that last time we had in between 500 and 600 people watching the class. So I was disappointed by the turnout. I think we had around 14 people last time, compared to almost 30 when we started. So, but when Jeremy told me that afterwards, that it really uplifted my spirits to continue having these. Also, I've got some questions for Scott about these designs. How far back do these designs go in time, estimated time?
It would be late woodland, if any of you are familiar with your Mississippian woodland archaic. It would be, that would be, late woodland would be around the birth of Christ to now.
So
these were the type of designs, correct me if I'm wrong, that were found inside some of the mounds that they
And
were
most of
excavated?
most of them was like Moundville, Old Moggy Mounds, Etowah Mounds. I do some Spyro stuff, and they, for years they thought that was Caddo, and now I'm finding out that most of all the artifacts that came out of there actually came from Cahokia in St. Louis, or Illinois. And they found another site up there that they say is actually as bigger than Cahokia is now. And they're putting they're putting the new football stadium right in the middle of it. So they're trying to recover as much as they can information from it as they can. But St. Louis will be putting their new stadium right on top of where the site was at, the real.
The
Cahokia Mound site?
Huh?
The Cahokia Mound site?
No, it'll be this new site they found.
Wow.
It was actually around, they said, the stockyards or something. And there's still mounds in the actual town of St. Louis. East St. Louis is where the Cahokia Mounds is at, and that's in Illinois.
Right.
Just over the line, over the Mississippi River. But most of my designs all come from the southeast and plumb down in Florida. Some of the Key Marco sites and some of those also do some of that. And I found too that the creeks actually had what they called a blue pottery that was very highly sought after by the Spanish and Europeans and the French. And I'm sure there's some of those in the archives over there. But I have found how they made a blue in Key Marco. They used the mulberry tree. It wasn't mulberry, it's mulberry. It's a different, and ground shell. And that ground shell would turn that blue to a blue stain. So I'm thinking that may be what they used. It was more of a stain than actual fired pottery blue. And then I've also found out that sumac would make a blue. And in some native language, sumac means pipe stem. And they would make a pipe stem. It's got a pip down to the center of it. And if you'll cut the top out of one of those and wait just a little while, there's a little worm that'll drill your hole for you. And you just have to cut it off and it's already drilled. And I have a bush in my backyard that just came up wild that does the same thing. If I want a pipe stem, I just clip the top out of it. And when I cut it off, the hole's already drilled. A lot of people couldn't figure out how they drilled the holes in the stems, and that's the way it was done. They didn't. The bug did it.
Wow.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing those pieces tonight. Is there any other announcements, George? Do you have any announcements, maybe the church? Anything coming up at the church?
Oh, you caught me off guard.
Well, let me just tell you, I know you have a Wednesday night service, right?
Right.
What time does that start?
6:30.
6:30. Okay, and I really enjoy going there. I found long-lost relatives over there. Probably
A few more.
haven't met yet. But I'd like to appreciate everybody coming and telling your short stories. And I'd like to get to know a lot of you a lot better in the future. But